The knock on the door came at exactly 7:30. I was in my room, putting the final touches on my makeup, when I heard Wesley's footsteps heading toward the front door. I smiled at my reflection. Right on time. "Can I help you?" I heard Wesley's voice, casual at first, then different. Uncertain. I knew that tone. It was the same tone he used 5 years ago when he realized I'd hired a lawyer before he could. The tone of a man who suddenly understands he's miscalculated something. "Good evening," a deep, confident voice responded. "I'm here for Amber." The silence that followed was delicious. Let me tell you my story where I didn't have to do anything to hurt back the two people who betrayed me. My name is Amber Torrance. I'm 32, a former financial advisor, and I'm currently living in my parents' old house in California with two people I'd rather set on fire than share breakfast with. Though to be fair, we don't share breakfast. Or lunch. Or anything, really. Those two people are my ex-husband, Wesley Larson, and my younger sister, Rina. Yes, you heard that right. My sister married my ex-husband. 5 years ago, Wesley and I were married. We had a nice life, or so I thought. I was climbing the corporate ladder, he was doing well in finance, and we were building our future together. Then one day, I came home early from a conference and found him in our bed with Rina. Not a stranger. Not a coworker. My sister. The betrayal was so cliché it would have been funny if it hadn't destroyed my life. They didn't even have the decency to look ashamed. Wesley fed me some garbage about finding his soulmate and how he never meant to hurt me. Rina cried actual tears and said she couldn't help who she loved. I filed for divorce the next day. They ran off together like some twisted romance novel, got married in Vegas, and for 5 years I heard nothing. My parents were devastated. They never approved, never forgave Rina for what she did, but she's still their daughter. It's complicated. Me? I moved on. I sold the apartment Wesley and I shared, rented a new apartment, and threw myself into work. I became one of the top financial advisors in the city. I traveled, I read books, I learned to cook. I existed very happily without Wesley Larson in my life. Then about a year ago, my parents, Howard and Gina, retired and moved to Maine. They asked if I'd be willing to live in their house here in California to maintain it, keep an eye on things, make sure it didn't sit empty. I agreed. It was a nice house, 2 bedrooms, quiet neighborhood in Montecito, good memories from childhood before everything went to hell. I moved in, paid the utilities and upkeep, and settled into a comfortable routine. And then, 2 months ago, my mother called. "Amber, sweetheart," she said, and I could hear the exhaustion in her voice. "Rina called. Wesley lost his job. They're being evicted. They have nowhere to go." I said nothing. She asked if they could stay at the house. Mom continued, "Just temporarily, until they get back on their feet." My stomach dropped. "No. Amber, please." My father's voice came on the line. They were both listening. "We know what she did. We know this is asking too much, but she's our daughter. Just 6 months. We'll make sure they stay out of your way." "Mom, Dad, that house is..." I stopped myself. It wasn't my house. It was theirs. I was just living there. "I'm living there. You're asking me to live with them?" "We know," Dad said quietly. "And we wouldn't ask if we had any other choice, but we can't let her be homeless, Amber. She's still our daughter." I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell them that Rina made her choices and now she could live with the consequences. But then an idea started forming in my mind. A wonderfully wicked idea. "Fine," I said. 6 months, not a day longer." Mom sighed with relief. "Thank you, sweetheart. We'll make sure..." "And Mom, Wesley doesn't speak to me, neither does Rina unless absolutely necessary. This is not a reconciliation. I'm doing this for you and Dad, not for them. Make that very clear." "Of course," Dad said. "And I'm still paying the bills," I added. "They don't touch anything. They stay in their room, they stay out of my way, and in 6 months, they're gone." "We'll make sure they understand," Mom promised. So Rina and Wesley moved in 2 months ago. Into my parents' house, where I was living. And let me tell you, they thought they were so clever. From day one, they made it their mission to remind me of what I lost. Rina would drape herself over Wesley on the couch when I walked through the living room. Wesley would laugh just a little too loud at her jokes. They'd whisper to each other and giggle like teenagers. "We're so happy together," Rina said once, looking right at me. I just smiled and went back to my book. They were living rent-free in my parents' house. a house I was maintaining and paying utilities for, and they had the audacity to try to make me feel bad. What they didn't know was that they weren't trying to drive me away because I was miserable. They were trying to drive me away because they wanted the house for themselves. The truth is, I wasn't bothered, not even a little. Because while they were performing their little show, I was on the phone every night with someone they didn't know existed. Someone who made Wesley Larson look like a participation trophy. Someone who was, at this very moment, standing at my front door. "I'm here for Amber," the voice said again. I grabbed my clutch, took one last look in the mirror, and smiled. Time for the show to begin. I should probably tell you about Bastian. Bastian Hendricks, 36, founder and CEO of Hendricks Global Capital, one of the most successful private equity firms in the country. Forbes estimated his net worth at just over $1 billion. The kind of man whose name appears in business magazines and whose decisions move markets. Also, the most beautiful man I've ever seen in my life. We met 2 years ago. I was working as a financial advisor at a boutique investment firm, and he came in for a consultation on a portfolio acquisition. I was assigned to his case. We spent 3 hours talking about risk assessments, market trends, and growth potential. He asked me to dinner. I said no. He asked again the next week. I said no again. The third time he said, "I'm not going to stop asking until you say yes." I laughed. "That's borderline harassment, Mr. Hendricks." "Then have dinner with me and tell me to stop in person," he said, grinning. "I promise I'll behave." I went to dinner. He didn't stop asking me out after that, but I didn't want him to. For 2 years, we dated casually. He traveled constantly, London, Singapore, Toronto, Sydney, and I was focused on my career. We never put a label on it. We were just there for each other when we could be. My friends knew. My coworkers knew. But I never told my family. After what happened with Wesley, I kept my personal life private. I didn't post on social media. I didn't bring boyfriends to family events. I protected my peace. Then, 2 months ago, 1 week before my parents called about Rina, Bastian asked me a question. We were at his penthouse in downtown Los Angeles. He'd just gotten back from a week in New York, and we were having wine on his balcony overlooking the city. "Amber," he said, setting down his glass. "I need to know something before I leave for Canada." "Leave?" I looked at him. "Where are you going?" "I'm opening new branches in Toronto and Sydney," he said. "I'll be gone for 2 months, maybe longer." My chest tightened. 2 months. "But before I go," he continued, taking my hand, "I need to know if you love me." I froze. "I'm in love with you, Amber," he said quietly. "I have been for a long time, and I can't leave for 2 months not knowing if you feel the same way." I looked at him, this brilliant, successful, gorgeous man, and realized I'd been protecting myself for so long that I'd almost missed this. I wanted to scream. I wanted to jump up and down like a little girl who just got a limited edition Barbie dream house for Christmas. I wanted to do a victory dance. I wanted to call every single person I'd ever known and yell, "He loves me," into the phone. My brain was doing cartwheels, literal cartwheels. "Yes," I said, "I love you." His face broke into the most beautiful smile I'd ever seen. "Then when I come back," he said, "I'm taking you to the charity gala at the Ritz-Carlton, and I'm going to show the entire city the woman I love." 1 week later, my parents called about Rina, and Bastian left for Canada. I told him about the situation, about Rina and Wesley moving in, about what they'd done to me 5 years ago. "You're not staying there for 6 months," he said immediately. "It's my parents' house. I don't really have a choice." "Then I'll buy you a house," he said simply. "Bastian, you can't just—" "I can, and I will. You shouldn't have to live with people who hurt you." 2 weeks later, he closed on an 8-acre estate in Montecito. Main house, guest house, pool house, staff quarters. Room to build 2 more houses if we ever wanted. He didn't even blink at the price tag. For 2 months, I lived with Rina and Wesley in my parents' house. And for 2 months, I smiled. They really thought they were winning. Every morning, Rina would make a big show of making Wesley breakfast. She'd kiss him at the table, right where I could see. "We're so lucky to have found each other," she'd say. I'd pour my coffee and head to my room. I didn't work anymore. Bastian had insisted I quit when we became official. He didn't want rumors of favoritism affecting my reputation or making his employees uncomfortable. So I spent my days reading, planning my future, and talking to Bastien. Every night, I'd close my door and call him. "How was your day, darling?" His voice was warm, even across the distance. "Entertaining," I'd say, keeping my voice low. "Rina made pot roast tonight. It was terrible." He laughed. "I can't wait to come home to you." 2 more weeks, I whispered. 2 more weeks, he promised. Rina and Wesley could hear me talking through the door. I knew they could, but they had no idea who I was talking to. One night, Wesley said, loud enough for me to hear, "She's probably talking to some sad, desperate guy. Maybe a widower or something." Rina giggled. "Oh God, probably some balding middle-aged man who thinks he's got a chance." I smiled in the dark and kept talking to Bastien. The mental torture was real, I'll give them that. But not for me. For them. Because no matter what they did, I didn't react. When Rina accidentally left her wedding photos on the kitchen counter, I walked right past them. When Wesley tried to make small talk, "So Amber, seeing anyone?" I just said, "That's none of your business, Wesley," and kept walking. When they sat on the couch, cuddling and watching romantic movies at full volume, I made myself a glass of wine, cooked my famous pot roast, and ate it in my room. Alone. Wesley loved my pot roast. I knew he could smell it from the living room. "God, that smells amazing," he muttered. "I can make pot roast." Rina said defensively, "I know, babe. Yours is great, too." Newsflash. Hers was not great. I didn't offer them any. Why would I? They were eating canned soup and ramen because they couldn't afford anything else. Meanwhile, I was very comfortable. Thank you very much. The wine was expensive, the roast was perfect, and in 2 weeks Bastien would be home. The frustration started to show. "Why isn't she upset?" Rina hissed one night. I wasn't supposed to hear, but the walls were thin. "I don't know," Wesley said. "She's acting like we don't even exist. We've been here for 2 months, Wesley. 2 months, and she's just fine. Maybe she really is over me. Or maybe she's just good at hiding it." I smiled in the dark. "Oh, Rina, if only you knew." The day of the gala, I woke up early. Rina and Wesley were already in the kitchen when I came out. Rina was making toast. Wesley was scrolling through job listings on his laptop, looking miserable. "Morning," I said pleasantly. They both looked up, surprised. I didn't usually talk to them. "Morning," Wesley said carefully. I poured myself coffee and leaned against the counter. "I'll be out tonight," I said. "I have an event." "An event?" Rina asked, her tone just a little too interested. A gala." "Oh," she exchanged a glance with Wesley. "That sounds nice. Work thing?" "Something like that," I said, smiling. I didn't elaborate. I just finished my coffee and went back to my room. I spent the entire afternoon getting ready. Hair, sleek and elegant, swept to one side. Makeup, classic, with a bold red lip. Dress, a floor-length black gown with a slit up the side. Simple. Stunning. Expensive. Jewelry. Diamond earrings. A gift from Bastien. When I looked in the mirror, I barely recognized myself. I looked like someone who had won. At 7:15, I heard Rina and Wesley in the living room. "She's been in there for hours," Rina muttered. "Who gets this dressed up for a work event?" "Maybe it's a date," Wesley said. Rina snorted. "With who?" "That guy she's always whispering to on the phone? Probably some loser." I smiled. At 7:30, I heard the car. Not just any car. A Maybach. The engine purred like a lion, deep and powerful. Beautiful. It was the kind of sound that made people stop and look. I grabbed my clutch and took a deep breath. "It's showtime, everybody." Then the knock came. I heard Wesley get up from the couch and walk to the door. I stepped out of my room and into the hallway, just out of sight, waiting. Wesley opened the door. And then, silence. "Good evening," Bastien's voice said. Smooth, confident. "I'm here for Amber." I walked into view. Wesley's face went completely blank. Rina appeared behind him, her mouth falling open. And there, standing in the doorway like he'd stepped out of a magazine, was Bastien Hendricks. Tailored black tuxedo, perfectly styled hair, a Patek Philippe watch on his wrist. The kind of presence that made a room feel smaller just by existing. He saw me, and his face lit up. "Amber," he said, his voice warm. He stepped inside, took my hand, and brought it to his lips. "Ready, my beautiful?" I smiled. "I've been ready." I glanced back at Rina and Wesley, just for a second. Rina looked like she'd been slapped. Wesley looked like he'd seen a ghost, and I smiled. Not a polite smile. Not a kind smile. A slow, satisfied, absolutely evil smile. The smile of someone who had just won. Then I took Bastien's arm, and we walked out the door. The Maybach pulled away, and I didn't look back. Behind us, in the house, I imagined Rina and Wesley standing in stunned silence, realizing, maybe for the first time, exactly what they'd lost and exactly what I'd found. I didn't come home that night. Bastien and I went to the gala, and it was perfect. He introduced me to everyone, CEOs, investors, old colleagues who remembered me from my previous firm. They were all charming, but I barely remembered their names. I was too busy replaying Wesley's face in my mind. That look of absolute shock. After the gala, we went back to his penthouse. We talked until 3 a.m, curled up on his couch with the city lights sprawling beneath us. "You enjoyed that, didn't you?" he said, smiling. "Enjoyed what?" The look on their faces. I laughed. "Maybe a little." "A little?" He raised an eyebrow. "Darling, you smiled like a villain in a movie." "I did not. You absolutely did." He kissed my forehead, and it was magnificent. I stayed the night at Bastien's penthouse. I fell asleep in Egyptian cotton sheets that probably cost more than Rina's entire wardrobe, thinking about how perfect everything had turned out. Back at the house, I found out later from my mother, who heard it from Rina in a frantic phone call, that Rina and Wesley stayed up all night. "Who was that?" Rina had paced the living room, her voice shrill. "I don't know," Wesley said, but he was lying. He knew exactly who Bastien Hendricks was. "You don't know. Wesley, that man showed up in a Maybach. A Maybach!" And Amber looked at us like she won, Wesley finished quietly. "She hasn't won anything," Rina snapped. "She's been sitting here for 2 months, miserable and alone, and now suddenly she has some rich boyfriend? Where did he even come from?" Wesley didn't answer. He was staring at his laptop, looking at a photo of Bastien from a Forbes article. "Wesley, Bastien Hendricks," he said slowly, "founder and CEO of Hendricks Global Capital." Rina leaned over his shoulder. So he's a billionaire, Rina. With a B. Silence. That's not possible," Rina whispered. "Amber doesn't know people like that." "Apparently she does." Rina sank onto the couch, her face pale. "How long has she been seeing him?" "I don't know. She's been on the phone every night," Rina said, her voice rising. "Every single night. That soft little voice she does. I thought she was talking to some loser, but it was him?" Wesley said nothing. "She's been laughing at us," Rina said, her voice breaking. "This whole time, she's been laughing at us." I came home the next morning around 10. I'd showered at Bastien's, changed into comfortable clothes he'd bought for me weeks ago. I kept a few things at his place, and grabbed an iced coffee on the way. I felt amazing. When I walked through the door, Rina and Wesley were waiting. They looked terrible. Rina's eyes were red and puffy, like she'd been crying. Wesley looked like he hadn't slept. They were both sitting on the couch, arms crossed, staring at me like I'd committed a crime. "Good morning," I said brightly, setting down my coffee. "Where were you?" Rina demanded. I looked at her. "That's none of your business. You didn't come home last night." "No, I didn't." "Were you with him?" Wesley asked, his voice tight. I turned to him slowly. "I told you not to speak to me unless absolutely necessary, Wesley. This doesn't qualify." "Amber, answer the question," Rina snapped. I laughed. Actually laughed. "You're joking, right? You think you have the right to interrogate me?" "We've been living here for 2 months, Rina said, standing up. 2 months, Amber. And you didn't say a word about having a boyfriend. You let us think." "Let you think what?" I interrupted, my voice cold now. "That I was sad, alone? Still pining over Wesley?" Rina's face flushed. "You performed your little show for 2 months, I continued. The kissing, the cuddling, the we're so in love act, and I let you, because it was entertaining." "Entertaining," Rina's voice cracked. "Very," I said. "Watching you try so hard to hurt me when I stopped caring about Wesley the day I signed the divorce papers? Priceless." Wesley flinched. "Who is he?" Rina demanded. "Who is Bastien Hendricks?" "My boyfriend," I said simply. "For how long?" 2 years. The silence was deafening. 2 years, Wesley repeated, his voice barely a whisper. "We made it official 2 months ago," I added. "Right before you moved in, actually. Perfect timing." Rina looked like she might be sick. "You've been dating a billionaire for 2 years and you didn't tell anyone?" "I didn't tell you," I corrected. "My friends know. My coworkers knew. I just didn't see the point in broadcasting my personal life to people who betrayed me." "This is insane," Rina said, shaking her head. "You're telling me you've been with him this whole time and you just—" "What?" Let us make fools of ourselves? You did that on your own, I said. Wesley stood up. Amber, don't, I said sharply. Don't apologize, don't explain, don't say anything, I don't care. He looked at me and for a moment I saw it. Regret. Real, genuine regret. Too late. That's when I heard the truck, a large moving truck backing into the driveway. Rina's head whipped toward the window. What is that? I smiled. That's for me. What? I walked to my room, unlocked the door, and opened it. Inside were boxes, packed and labeled, ready to go. I'd been packing for the past week, a little bit each night after my calls with Bastien. They never knew because my door was always locked. I didn't trust Rina. I never had. You're moving out? Wesley said from the hallway, his voice stunned. Yes. Where are you going? Rina asked. I turned to look at her, and I couldn't help it. I smiled. That same evil smile from last night. I'm going to the house Bastien bought for me. Rina's mouth fell open. He bought you a house? Wesley asked. He did, I replied. When? Last month, I said. Right after I agreed to let you two move in here. I told him about the situation and he said, you're not staying there for 6 months. I'll buy you a house. So he did. I started carrying boxes toward the door. The movers came in to help. Rina and Wesley just stood there, frozen. Oh, I said, pausing at the door. I almost forgot. Mom and Dad are coming to visit. Rina's head snapped up. What? They're coming to meet Bastien, I said. He's sending his private jet to pick them up from Maine. They'll be here this afternoon. His private jet, Wesley repeated numbly. And they'll be staying at my place, the new house. I looked at Rina. You're welcome to come too if you want, to meet him. Dinner's at 7. Let me know if you're coming. The look on her face was everything I'd been waiting for. You can't be serious, Rina stammered. Oh, I'm very serious. I picked up another box and carried it outside. The movers worked efficiently, loading everything into the truck. I supervised, checked my list, made sure nothing was left behind. Rina and Wesley watched from the doorway like ghosts. When the last box was loaded, I walked back to the house one more time. I pulled an envelope out of my purse and handed it to Wesley. He took it automatically, confused. What's this? The utility bills, I said, for this month. Electric, water, gas, internet. All paid in full. Okay, he said slowly. That's the last time I'll be paying them, I added cheerfully. You're on your own moving forward. The color drained from his face. Wait, what? Rina said, stepping forward. The bills, I repeated slowly, like I was talking to a child. I've been paying them for the past year while I lived here, and for the 2 months you've been here. But since I'm moving out, I shrugged. Not my problem anymore. Amber, we can't, Rina started. Can't afford them? I finished. Yeah, I figured. You might want to talk to Mom and Dad about that. I smiled, or, get jobs. Wesley stared at the envelope in his hand like it was a bomb. The internet bill alone is $150 a month, I said helpfully. Electric's usually around $200 this time of year. Water's about $60. You'll figure it out, I'm sure. I turned to walk back to the truck. Amber, wait, Rina called out. I paused and looked back. She looked desperate, panicked. We don't have that kind of money right now, she said, her voice small. I know, I said simply. So what are we supposed to do? I tilted my head, pretending to think about it. I don't know, Rina. What did you do 5 years ago when you needed something? Oh, right. You took it. Her face went red. Good luck, I said, and then I got in the truck and left. I pulled out my phone and texted Bastien to let him know I'm on my way home. Wesley thought he'd won 5 years ago when he chose Rina, but I'd won the long game, and tonight my parents were going to meet the man who loved me, the man who bought me a house, the man who made Wesley Larson look like a clearance bin knockoff. Rina and Wesley could come to dinner if they wanted, but something told me they wouldn't be able to help themselves. Howard and Gina Torrance had never been on a private jet before. My mother told me later, in great detail, while laughing so hard she cried, about the entire experience. It started at the small regional airport in Maine. They'd gotten the text from me the day before. Bastien is sending a jet to pick you up tomorrow at 2 p.m. Pack for a few days. Dad thought I was joking. A jet, he'd said. Amber, you don't need to. It's already arranged, Dad, I'd texted back. Just be there. So they showed up at the airport, both of them dressed nicely, but casually, carrying small overnight bags, absolutely convinced this was some kind of misunderstanding. Maybe she meant a small chartered plane. Mom whispered to Dad as they walked through the private terminal. Like one of those little six-seaters. Then they saw it. A Gulfstream G650, sleek, white, and gleaming on the tarmac. A man in a suit, the pilot, walked up to them with a clipboard. "Mr. and Mrs. Torrance?" Yes," Dad said. "Right this way, please. Mr. Hendricks has everything prepared for you." Mom grabbed Dad's arm. "Howard," she hissed. "That's a big plane." "I see it, Gina. That's not a charter. That's a—" "I know what it is." They boarded the plane in a daze. Inside was even more ridiculous. Cream leather seats that looked like they belonged in a spa, a full bar, a flat-screen TV, a flight attendant who greeted them with champagne and warm towels. "Can I get you anything before we take off?" the attendant asked. "We have a selection of meals prepared, or if you'd prefer something specific, our chef can accommodate." "Your chef?" Mom repeated faintly. "Yes, ma'am." Dad sat down slowly in one of the seats. "Gina, what has our daughter gotten herself into?" "I don't know," Mom said, accepting a glass of champagne with a shaky hand. "But I'm starting to think we should have asked more questions." The flight was 3.5 hours. They ate filet mignon. Mom took approximately 70 photos on her phone. Dad kept muttering, "This is insane. This is absolutely insane." When they landed in California, things got even more surreal. Waiting on the tarmac was a Rolls-Royce Phantom. Not a town car, not a limo, a Rolls-Royce. "Oh my God," Mom whispered. The driver, another man in a suit, opened the door for them. "Good afternoon, Mr. and Mrs. Torrance. I'm James. Mr. Hendricks asked me to take you to see your daughter." Is this his car?" Dad asked. "One of them, sir. One of them," Dad repeated. Mom climbed into the back seat and immediately sank into leather so soft it felt like sitting on a cloud. "Howard," she said, "I think our daughter is dating a billionaire. I'm starting to get that impression, yes." James drove them through the city and then out toward Montecito. But not the regular part of Montecito. The nice part. The ones with gates and long driveways and houses you couldn't see from the road. "Where are we going?" Mom asked. "To Miss Torrance's residence, ma'am," James said. "She's expecting you." "Her residence," Dad muttered. "Of course, her residence. But first," James said, "they'd requested a stop at their old house to say hello." Mom and Dad exchanged a look. "Oh," Mom said. "Right, Rina and Wesley." The mood in the car shifted. When they pulled up to the house, the modest two-bedroom where they'd raised their daughters, Rina and Wesley were sitting on the front porch. They looked rough. Rina's hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail. Wesley was unshaven. Both of them looked tired and stressed. The Rolls-Royce purred to a stop in the driveway. James got out and opened the door for Howard and Gina. Rina and Wesley's jaws dropped. "Mom? Dad?" Rina stood up slowly. What is that?" "Oh, this?" Mom said, climbing out of the car like she did this every day. "Bastien sent his driver to pick us up from the airport." "His driver?" Wesley repeated. We flew in on his jet." Mom adjusted her purse, trying very hard to look casual. "It was lovely. They had a chef on board." Rina looked like she might faint. "You flew here on a private jet?" she said slowly. "We did," Mom said, a little too brightly. She was clearly enjoying this. "It was our first time. The seats were so comfortable. And the champagne. Howard, what was that champagne?" "Dom Perignon," Dad said. "Right, Dom Perignon." Mom smiled at Rina. "How have you been, sweetheart?" Rina's smile faltered. "I've been fine." Good. Mom looked at Wesley. Her smile disappeared entirely. "Wesley?" "Mrs. Torrance," he said stiffly. An awkward silence settled over the porch. "Well," Dad said, clapping his hands together. "We can't stay long. We're expected at Amber's." "Right," Mom said. "We're so excited to see her new place. She said it's lovely." "Her new place?" Rina's voice was tight. "Oh yes, didn't she tell you? Bastien bought her a house." Mom said it casually, like it was the most normal thing in the world. "We're staying there for a few days." Rina's face went pale. "She invited you too, didn't she?" Mom added. "For dinner tonight?" Rina and Wesley exchanged a look. "She mentioned it," Rina said carefully. "Well, you should come," Mom said. "We'd love to have you, wouldn't we, Howard?" Dad's expression said he absolutely would not love to have them, but he nodded politely. "Sure." "We'll see," Rina said. "All right, then." Mom gave her a quick hug, the kind of hug you give someone out of obligation, not warmth. "We'll let you know how it goes." They climbed back into the Rolls-Royce. As James pulled away, Mom looked back at the house and sighed. "They look miserable," she said. "They should," Dad replied. 20 minutes later, the car turned onto a private road. Mom said, sitting up straighter. Where are we? The Hendricks estate, ma'am, James said. Estate? Dad repeated. They drove through a gate, an actual gate with a security guard, and up a long tree-lined driveway. And then they saw it. Not a house, a compound. The main house was massive, modern, glass and stone with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked a sprawling lawn. There was a fountain, actual sculptures, a tennis court in the distance, gardens that seemed to go on forever. Oh my God, Mom whispered. Howard, this isn't a house. This is an estate, Dad finished. How much land is this? Mom asked James. About 8 acres, ma'am, James said. The main house, guest house, pool house, and staff quarters. There's still room to build if Mr. Hendricks ever wanted to expand. 8 acres, Mom repeated faintly. In California. It's a good investment, James said with a small smile. James pulled up to the front entrance where I was waiting. I walked down the steps, smiling. Hi, Mom. Hi, Dad. Mom got out of the car and immediately pulled me into a hug. Amber Marie Torrance, she said. You have some explaining to do. I laughed. I know. Dad hugged me next, looking around in shock. Sweetheart, what is this place? This is home, I said simply. Home, he repeated. Amber, this is a lot, I know. I looped my arm through his. Come on, Bastian's waiting inside. He's excited to meet you. Mom looked back at the Rolls-Royce, then at the mansion, then at me. We thought you were moving into a house, she said faintly. I did. A normal house. This is normal, I said, grinning. For Bastian. Oh my God, Mom said again. I led them up the steps and through the front door. The foyer alone was bigger than their entire house in Maine. Amber, Dad said, stopping in his tracks. Are you sure about this? About what? All of this. This is a lot. I looked at him. Dad, I love him, and he loves me. The rest is just details. Details, Dad muttered. She says it's details. Mom was staring at a chandelier that probably cost more than a car. And then Bastian appeared. He walked into the foyer with a warm smile, dressed casually in slacks and a button-down shirt, looking every bit the confident, successful man he was. Mr. and Mrs. Torrance, he said, extending his hand. It's wonderful to finally meet you. I'm Bastian. Dad shook his hand, still looking slightly dazed. Howard, nice to meet you. And I'm Gina, Mom said, shaking his hand next. Thank you for all of this. The jet, the car, the everything. It was my pleasure, Bastian said. Amber's told me so much about you. I wanted to make sure you were comfortable. Comfortable, Mom repeated, glancing around. Right, Bastian smiled. Come, let me show you around. Dinner won't be ready for another hour, and I thought you might like to see the guest house. Guest house? Dad said weakly. For you, Bastian said. If you'd like to stay here while you're visiting, it's private, fully furnished, and right on the property. You'd be close to Amber, and you wouldn't have to worry about anything. He didn't say Rina and Wesley, but everyone heard it anyway. Mom looked at Dad. Dad looked at Mom. And then they both looked at me. I just smiled. We'd love to see it, Mom said finally. The guest house was bigger than their house in Maine. 2 bedrooms, a full kitchen, a living room with a fireplace, and a view of the gardens. This is ours, Mom said, standing in the middle of the living room. If you want it, Bastian said. No rent, no utilities, just a place for you to stay whenever you visit, or if you'd prefer, you could live here full time. Dad sat down heavily on the couch. Live here. It's just an option, Bastian said gently. I know you're retired in Maine, and that's wonderful, but if you ever wanted to be closer to Amber, the offer stands. There's one more thing I wanted to show you, Bastian said. He led them behind the guest house to a fenced area with rich, dark soil and raised garden beds. The previous owner started a vegetable garden here but never finished it, Bastian said. I thought, if you were interested, it could be yours. Mom gasped. Howard, look at this. Dad stepped forward, examining the soil. That's good soil. You could grow anything here. Mom turned to Bastian, tears in her eyes. We could really live here? In the guest house? It's yours, Bastian said, for as long as you want it. Mom looked at Dad. Dad looked at the garden, then at the guest house, then at Bastian. We'll take it, he said. Mom laughed through her tears. We will? We will, Dad confirmed. Mom's eyes filled with tears. That's incredibly generous, she said quietly. Amber's family is my family, Bastian said simply. I reached for his hand and squeezed it. Dad looked at me. You really love him, don't you? I really do, I said. He nodded slowly. Then I guess we're staying for dinner. Mom laughed, wiping her eyes. We should call Rina. Tell her to come. I hesitated. You think she'll actually show up? Oh, she'll show up, Mom said, a knowing look on her face. She won't be able to help herself. We already texted them the address. Rina and Wesley showed up at 6:45, 15 minutes early. I watched from the window as their beat-up Honda Civic pulled through the gate, after being stopped and verified by security, of course. They came, I said. Bastien came up behind me, resting his hands on my shoulders. Of course they did. They couldn't resist. He was right. The curiosity must have been eating them alive. I answered the door myself. Rina was wearing what was probably her nicest dress, a floral sundress that looked like it came from a department store clearance rack. Wesley had on khakis and a button-down that was slightly wrinkled. They both looked deeply uncomfortable. Hi, Rina said, her voice strained. We came. I see that, I stepped aside. Come in. They walked into the foyer and I watched their faces, the chandelier, the marble floors, the sweeping staircase, the original artwork on the walls. Rina's mouth fell open. Wesley just stared. This is, Rina started. Home, I finished. Can I take your jackets? We didn't bring any, Wesley said faintly. Of course. Well, everyone's in the dining room. Follow me. I led them through the house, past the living room with its vaulted ceilings, past the library with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, past the sitting room with a view of the gardens. How many rooms does this place have? Wesley asked. In the main house? 12 bedrooms, I said casually, plus the guest house, the pool house, and the staff quarters. Rina made a choking sound. The dining room was stunning. A long table that could seat 20, set for 6. Candles, fresh flowers, fine china. And at the head of the table, standing to greet them, was Bastien. He looked effortlessly elegant in dark slacks and a crisp white shirt, rolled up at the sleeves. He smiled warmly. You must be Rina and Wesley, he said, extending his hand. I'm Bastien. It's nice to meet you again. Rina shook his hand like she was in a trance. Hi. Wesley shook his hand too, but I saw the way his jaw tightened, the way his eyes lingered on Bastien's watch, a Patek Philippe that cost more than a car. Please, sit, Bastien said, gesturing to the table. Mom and Dad were already seated, looking far more after spending the afternoon exploring the grounds. Rina, Wesley, Mom said. I'm so glad you came. Wouldn't miss it, Rina said weakly. Everyone sat down. Rina and Wesley were directly across from me and Bastien. Perfect. A moment later, the door to the kitchen opened, and a man in a chef's coat appeared with 2 assistants. Good evening, he said. I'm Chef Mark. Tonight's first course is a roasted beet salad with goat cheese, candied walnuts, and a balsamic reduction. He placed the plates in front of us with practiced precision. Wesley stared at his plate. You have a private chef. Yes, Bastien said simply. Chef Mark has been with me for 3 years. He's incredible. This looks amazing, Mom said, picking up her fork. We ate in relative silence for a moment, and then Bastien spoke. So, Wesley, he said conversationally, Amber mentioned you worked in finance. What did you do? Wesley shifted in his seat. I was a portfolio manager for Anderson and Cross. Ah, Anderson and Cross, Bastien said, nodding. Good firm. I'm sorry to hear they let you go. It wasn't them, Wesley said. The company was acquired. New ownership cleaned house. That's the risk with acquisitions. Bastien said, new leadership often wants their own people. Yeah, Wesley said tightly. Rina jumped in, clearly trying to change the subject. So, Bastien, what do you do? Bastien smiled. I'm in private equity. My firm, Hendricks Global Capital, acquires and restructures companies. Restructures, Rina repeated. We buy underperforming companies, improve their operations, and either sell them or take them public, Bastien explained. It's challenging work, but rewarding. And profitable, it seems, Wesley muttered under his breath. Bastien heard him. I've been very fortunate, he said evenly. The second course arrived, pan-seared scallops with a lemon butter sauce. Dad, bless him, tried to ease the tension. So, Bastien, he said, how did you and Amber meet? Bastien's face lit up. She was assigned to one of my portfolio consultations 2 years ago. I walked into the conference room, and there she was, brilliant, confident, and completely unimpressed by me. I laughed. That's not true. It is, Bastien insisted. I asked her to dinner 3 times before she finally said yes. You were very persistent, I said. I knew what I wanted, he said, looking at me with such warmth that my heart squeezed. Rina looked like she might be sick. And you've been together ever since? Mom asked. More or less, Bastien said. I travel a lot for work, so we kept things unofficial for a while. But 2 months ago, before I left for Canada, I asked her to be mine. Officially. He reached over and took my hand, and she said yes. Wesley was gripping his fork so hard his knuckles were white. The main course arrived, filet mignon with truffle mashed potatoes and roasted asparagus. This is incredible, Dad said. Chef Mark, you've outdone yourself. Chef Mark smiled from the doorway. Thank you, sir. Enjoy. As we ate, the conversation continued, but I could feel the tension building. Rina could barely eat. She kept glancing at me, at Bastien, at the house around us. Wesley was quiet, his jaw tight. And then, after dessert, a delicate creme brulee that Rina barely touched, Bastien stood up. Everyone's finished, he said. Why don't we move to the lounge? I have an excellent bottle of wine I've been saving. The lounge bar was stunning. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the gardens, now lit with soft landscape lighting. A marble bar with leather bar stools, shelves lined with bottles that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Bastien poured wine for everyone, a 1990 Chateau Margaux that Wesley clearly recognized based on the way his eyes widened. This is a $2,000 bottle, Wesley muttered. Is it? Bastien said casually, like he genuinely didn't remember. I thought it would pair well with the evening. We all settled in, Mom and Dad on the couch, Rina and Wesley on chairs, me standing next to Bastien at the bar. The sun was setting through the windows, painting everything in gold. Bastien set down his wine glass. Actually, he said, before we get too comfortable, there's something I need to do. I looked at him, confused. He turned to face me, and his expression shifted, softer, vulnerable in a way I'd rarely seen. Amber, he said, and then he got down on one knee. I stopped breathing. Oh my God, Mom whispered. Rina's wine glass froze halfway to her lips. Bastien pulled a small velvet box from his pocket and opened it. Inside was the most breathtaking ring I'd ever seen. A round, brilliant diamond, at least 5 carats, set in platinum with a halo of smaller diamonds and more diamonds running down the band. It caught the setting sun and exploded with light. Amber Torrance, Bastien said, his voice steady but his eyes emotional. 2 years ago, you walked into a conference room and changed my life. You were brilliant, confident, and completely unimpressed by me. I laughed through the tears already streaming down my face. I asked you to dinner 3 times before you finally said yes, he continued. And even then, I knew you were the one. Mom was crying. Dad was smiling, his arm around her. Rina looked like she'd been turned to stone. Wesley's face had gone completely pale. You've shown me what real strength looks like, Bastien said. The way you rebuilt your life after everything that happened. The way you love your parents. The way you're kind but never weak. The way you make me want to be better every single day. He looked up at me, and I saw everything in his eyes. Love, devotion, forever. I don't want to spend another day without knowing you'll be my wife, he said. Amber, will you marry me? Yes, I said, my voice breaking. Yes, of course, yes. He slipped the ring onto my finger. It fit perfectly and stood up, pulling me into his arms. We kissed, and I heard Mom sobbing happy tears and Dad clapping. And in my peripheral vision, I saw Rina, staring at my hand, at the ring, at the man holding me, at the life she would never have. Congratulations, Mom rushed over, pulling me into a hug. Oh, sweetheart, I'm so happy for you. Dad shook Bastien's hand, then pulled him into a hug. Welcome to the family, son. Thank you, sir, Bastien said, grinning. Let me see the ring. Mom grabbed my hand. The diamond caught the light and sparkled like stars. It was easily the most beautiful piece of jewelry I'd ever seen. Bastien, this is stunning, Mom said. Only the best for Amber, he said simply. I looked over at Rina and Wesley. They were still sitting in their chairs, frozen. Rina's face was white, her eyes locked on the ring. Wesley looked small, diminished, like he'd been physically struck. Rina, Wesley? Mom said, trying to include them. Isn't this wonderful? Congratulations, Wesley said mechanically. That's great. Rina said nothing. Rina? Mom prompted. It's beautiful, Rina finally whispered, but her voice was hollow. An awkward silence settled over the room. Well, Dad said, a little too brightly, this calls for a toast. Bastien poured fresh glasses of champagne, Dom Perignon naturally. We all raised our glasses. To Amber and Bastien, Dad said. May your life together be filled with love, laughter, and happiness. To Amber and Bastian, everyone echoed. Even Rina and Wesley, though their voices were barely audible. We drank. Rina set her glass down with a shaking hand. I need some air, she said abruptly, standing up. Rina, Mom started. I'm fine, I just need a minute. She walked out onto the balcony. Wesley looked at his hands. I should probably check on her. Of course, Mom said. He left. Outside on the balcony, Rina was gripping the railing, crying silently. Rina, Wesley said quietly, did you see that ring? She whispered. Yes. That's at least a 5-carat diamond, Wesley. That ring probably costs more than our house. I know. And the way he looked at her. Rina's voice broke. Like she's everything. Like nothing else in the world matters. Wesley said nothing. That should have been us, Rina said. That should have been our life. Rina. If we hadn't, she couldn't finish. Wesley stared out at the gardens, the sprawling, perfectly manicured grounds that seemed to go on forever. We need to go, he said finally. What? We need to leave. Now. He said, but, Rina, I can't sit in there and watch them celebrate while we're... He stopped himself. We just need to go. Rina turned to look at him, and for the first time she saw something in his eyes. Not regret about choosing her, but a dawning realization of what they'd both thrown away. Inside, they made their excuses. You're leaving? Mom asked. Yeah, Wesley said. We should get going. Congratulations again, Amber. Bastian. Thank you, Bastian said warmly. Rina couldn't even look at me. She just walked to the door, her face blotchy and red. Rina, I called out. She stopped but didn't turn around. If you'd like, I said carefully, Mom can let you know when we set a date, for the wedding. The words hung in the air, an invitation, but just to know about it, to see once again what she'd lost. Rina's shoulders shook. Thank you, she whispered. Then they left. After they were gone, there was a long moment of silence. Then Mom spoke. They need help. Dad and I looked at her. They do, Mom said, and we're going to give it to them, but with conditions. I nodded slowly. What are you thinking? We'll talk to them, Dad said. Give them a real chance, but they have to prove they're willing to work for it. When? I asked. Tomorrow, Mom said. We'll go to the house and lay it out for them. The next morning, my parents drove to the house. I didn't go with them. This was something they needed to do as parents without me there. But Mom called me afterward and told me everything. Rina and Wesley were in the living room when our parents arrived. They looked exhausted, like they'd barely slept after the dinner. Mom, Dad, Rina said, standing up. We weren't expecting you. Sit down, Dad said, not unkindly. We need to talk. They all sat at the kitchen table. Dad pulled out his checkbook. We've made a decision about the house, he said. Rina and Wesley exchanged nervous looks. We're giving it to you, Mom said. Rina's face lit up. What? We're signing the deed over, Dad continued. The house will be in your names, but there are conditions. The hope in Rina's eyes dimmed slightly. What conditions? Dad wrote 2 checks, one significantly larger than the other, and slid them across the table to Wesley. This one, Dad said, pointing to the larger check, is for utilities. Electric, water, gas, internet. 6 months' worth. Wesley stared at the amount. Mr. Torrance, This one, Dad continued, pointing to the second check, is for food and groceries. Use it wisely. We can't accept this, Wesley said, though his voice lacked conviction. You can, and you will, Mom said firmly, but understand what this means. You have 6 months to both find jobs. Real, stable jobs. And if we can't? Rina asked quietly. If, after 6 months, any of the utilities get cut off because you couldn't pay them, you're out, Dad said, his voice hard. We'll sell the house. You'll have nowhere to go. Rina's eyes widened. And the deed, Mom added, will only be transferred to your names after you both have jobs, stable employment. You prove to us that you can support yourselves and the house becomes yours. There was a heavy silence. We are giving you 6 months to get your lives together, Mom said, her voice softening slightly. That's more than fair. That's more than most people get. But if you waste this opportunity, Dad said, leaning forward, if you spend the next 6 months feeling sorry for yourselves instead of working, you'll have no one to blame but yourselves. Wesley looked down at the checks in his hands. They were lifelines, literal lifelines. This is incredibly generous, he said finally, his voice thick. Thank you. Don't thank us yet, Dad said, standing up. Thank us in 6 months when you've turned your lives around. Mom stood as well, smoothing her skirt. We believe you can do this, but you have to actually do it. Rina nodded, tears streaming down her face. We will, I promise. Good, Mom said. Mom and Dad walked to the door. Before leaving, Mom turned back. Rina, she said softly, we love you, but you have to grow up now. And then they left. Rina and Wesley stood in the kitchen, staring at the checks on the table. The silence was heavy. Finally, Wesley picked up the checks and sank into a chair. When I was married to Amber, he said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. Rina looked at him, still standing. Wesley, I never worried about money, he continued, staring at the checks in his hands. Rina stiffened. She always helped with the bills, Wesley said. Even when I was between jobs, or when things were tight, she never made me feel bad about it. She just handled it. Wesley, why are you bringing this up now? Rina asked. And she cooked, he continued, as if she hadn't spoken. Every night, even when she worked late, even when she was exhausted, she'd come home and make dinner. Real dinner, not canned soup, not ramen. Rina's face flushed red. I thought she was emasculating me, Wesley said, his voice hollow. I thought her paying bills made me look weak, made me insignificant, like I wasn't man enough to take care of my own household. He let out a bitter laugh. But last night, sitting in that mansion, watching her get proposed to by a billionaire with a 5-carat diamond ring... He trailed off. What? Rina whispered. What did you realize? Wesley looked up at her, his eyes red. She wasn't making me feel small, he said. She was trying to make life easier for me. She loved me so much that she didn't want me to stress about money. She wanted to be a partner, a team. His voice cracked. And I threw it away, he said, because my ego couldn't handle being helped by my wife. Rina sank into the chair across from him, tears streaming down her face. Wesley, you said you loved me. I did, he said, looking at her. I do. But Rina, Amber was a good woman, and I didn't see it until it was too late. Rina sobbed quietly. With you, I pay for everything, Wesley continued, his voice soft but cutting. The bills we can barely afford, the food, everything. And you don't work, and I'm drowning. That's not fair. It's the truth, Wesley said. With Amber, we were partners. With you, I'm just trying to survive. So you regret me? Rina's voice broke. You regret choosing me? Wesley was quiet for a long, painful moment. I regret the choice, he said finally. I regret thinking that passion was more important than partnership. I regret not appreciating what I had. He looked down at the checks again. It took seeing her with a billionaire in a mansion, getting a ring that costs more than everything we own combined, for me to realize what I lost. So what does that mean for us? Rina whispered. Wesley set the checks down on the table carefully. It means, he said slowly, that we have 6 months to prove we're not complete failures. Your parents gave us money, a house, a real chance. He looked at her. Tomorrow, we both start looking for jobs, real jobs, and we make this work, because we don't get another chance after this. Rina nodded, wiping her eyes. They sat at the kitchen table in silence, the checks between them. 6 months' worth of bills, 6 months' worth of food, 6 months to turn their lives around, or lose everything. Wesley finally stood up, folding the checks and putting them in his wallet. I'm going to bed, he said quietly. Rina nodded. She stayed at the table for a long time after he left, staring at the place where the checks had been, wondering how they'd gotten here, and wondering if 6 months would be enough. Back at the estate, I stood on the balcony with Bastien, looking out at the gardens under the stars. Do you ever think about him? Bastien asked quietly. Wesley? Yes, I thought about it, sometimes. Not because I miss him, but because I wonder if he realizes what he gave up. I think he does now, Bastien said. Maybe. I looked down at my ring, watching it sparkle in the moonlight. But it's too late. Do you feel bad for him? He asked. I considered the question. No, he made his choice, and so did I. Bastien pulled me closer. You know what the difference is between him and me? What? I asked. He saw your success as a threat, Bastien said. I see it as an honor. You're brilliant, capable, and strong, and I get to spend the rest of my life supporting you the way you supported him, except I'll actually appreciate it. I turned to face him, tears in my eyes. How did I get so lucky? I'm the lucky one, he said, kissing me softly. And standing there in the home we'd build together, wearing the ring he'd chosen for me, I knew something Wesley would never understand. Real love isn't about who pays the bills, it's about who's willing to build a life together. 6 months passed. Rina and Wesley struggled at first. The job market was tough and their pride made it harder. But reality has a way of humbling people. By the second month, Wesley swallowed his pride and took a job at a call center. $12 an hour. It wasn't what he'd imagined, but it was work. Rina found a position waitressing at a local diner. The tips weren't great, but combined with Wesley's income, they could pay the bills. Barely, but they did it. Around the 5-month mark, something unexpected happened. Wesley got a call from a company called Hendricks Financial Solutions, one of Bastian's subsidiaries. They were looking for a portfolio manager, mid-level position, good salary, benefits. Wesley almost didn't believe it. "I didn't even apply there," he said to the HR representative. "Your resume came highly recommended," she said. "We'd like to bring you in for an interview." Long story short, he got the job. The salary was 3 times what he'd been making at the call center. When he told Rina, she cried. They both cried. They knew it was because of me. They knew Bastien had made it happen. And for the first time in their lives, the full weight of their betrayal crashed down on them. They had destroyed the one person who would have given them everything. And even now, even after all the pain they'd caused, that person still made sure they had a fighting chance in life. On their 6-month deadline, my parents officially transferred the deed to the house into Rina and Wesley's names. They'd both kept their jobs. They'd paid the utilities. They could survive. It wasn't the life they dreamed of when they ran off together 5 years ago, but it was something. As for me, Bastien and I got married 6 months after the proposal. It was a beautiful ceremony at the estate, intimate, elegant, with about 50 guests. Close friends, family, and a few of Bastien's business partners. My parents walked me down the aisle together, both of them beaming with pride. The gardens were in full bloom. String lights hung from the trees. Chef Mark had outdone himself with the reception dinner. It was perfect. We'd sent invitations to Rina and Wesley. Mom had asked if we were sure. "They're still family," I'd said, "and I want them to know they're welcome. What they do with that invitation is up to them." They didn't come. But 3 days before the wedding, both of them sent messages. I read them privately, sitting in the garden with a cup of tea. Rina's was an apology, a real one. She acknowledged what she'd done, thanked me for the help, and told me I deserved my happiness. Wesley's was similar, grateful, regretful, wishing us well. I didn't respond right away. I sat with the messages for a while, letting myself feel whatever I needed to feel, and then I wrote back. Brief, polite, wishing them well. It wasn't forgiveness, not fully, but it was closure, and that was enough. On our wedding day, there was no drama, no awkward encounters, no tearful apologies, just love, laughter, and the people who truly mattered. 5 years ago, I'd lost everything, but tonight I had everything I'd ever wanted. A man who loved me for exactly who I was, a family that supported me, a life I'd built on my own terms, and the knowledge that no matter what anyone took from me, they could never take my ability to rise. That was my melodic vengeance. Not destruction, but transformation. Not bitterness, but peace. And it was beautiful.
If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button and drop a comment below. Don't forget to follow for more content just like this. Thanks for watching. Catch you next time.